Hey guys, tonight we descend into smoke, sweat, and the clanging rhythm of iron and fire. You stand with ash in your nostrils, a hammer blistering your hand, and dreams shrinking with each forged breath. You're about 8 years old and already older than your years. An apprentice to a blacksmith in a world that won't remember your name, but desperately needs your arms. You're not in the storybooks tonight. There's no gleaming armor or noble rescue, just a soot-covered child shaping nails for war horses and hinges for castle gates. Your master barks commands. You nod and cough. The forge roars beside you like a dragon with no mercy. Your job? Keep the flames alive, wield tongs that burn your palms, and learn not to scream when hot iron slaps skin. You probably won't survive this, honestly. That's the running bet among the village kids. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're tuning in from and what time it is. Chattagong at midnight? A sleepy cottage in Wales? I love hearing those. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You drag a bucket of charcoal across the dirt floor while the bellows sigh like a tired beast. You don't speak unless spoken to. There's no school here, just the metallic stutter of iron meeting anvil. By 13, your muscles will harden and your lungs will soften. And yeah, historians still argue whether apprenticeships were as long or brutal across different regions. But in most cases, you were legally bound to your master until 21. That's nearly 2 decades of blistered skin and forge-shadowed days. Once a week, your shirt becomes a scratchy sponge for sweat and grime. The village priest preaches fire as purification. You nod, wondering if God has ever smelled singed eyebrows. Time skips. You're 17 now. Your hands resemble old roots, gnarled and cracked. You forged hinges for merchant wagons, spearheads for local militia, and once, very briefly, a tiny lock for the mayor's private cabinet. You weren't paid extra, but someone in the crowd whispered your name that day. That's basically fame, right? Then there's the smoke, ever present. You dream in smoke. You taste it even when you eat fresh bread. And there's a quirky fringe theory that medieval blacksmiths developed a tolerance to smoke that altered their senses. Some say their vision sharpened in dim light. Others think it's nonsense. But you feel it. The way your eyes adjust so quickly in torch-lit corridors. How you can spot the flaw in a blade from across the room. The forge becomes your cathedral. You pray through hammer strikes. You curse through warped steel. You learn to judge metal by sound, how it sings or screams. Iron becomes your second language. But blacksmithing isn't romantic. You spend most days repeating the same patterns. Nails, horseshoes, rudimentary hinges. You make parts for tools that other men get credit for. You watch knights ride off with swords you shaped, their armor gleaming with your forgotten touch. Your master passes away during a winter colder than any you've known. You inherit the forge, not with pride, but with debt. The local baron demands repairs to his gate. You nod, haggling not with coin, but with the promise of meat for your hearth. And meat? That's practically gold. Still, there's a strange satisfaction when you wake before sunrise and hear the village stir around your forge. Smoke curls upward like a greeting. You begin again. You wake up with aches that don't have names yet. Your joints creak like rusted hinges, and that's before you even touch metal. By now, you've stopped thinking about someday, because every day feels like the same loop of hammer, burn, grind, repeat. Today, your task is a horseshoe. Again. But this one needs to fit a warhorse, which means it has to endure weight, mud, stone, and maybe, if its rider's unlucky, an arrow to the leg. No pressure. The forge groans. You tug bellows until sweat trickles down your spine like a parade of tiny regrets. The coal bed flares bright, and you plunge a half-forged shoe into the blaze. There's a scent, sharp and bitter, like scorched iron mixed with old leather, and the faint memory of last week's burnt fingers. Today, your hands are going to bleed. It's not a prediction, it's a ritual. You lift the shoe with your tongs, check its glowing curve, then transfer it to the anvil. It sings, a high metallic note under each hammer strike. You've learned to read those songs. Too dull? You're off tempo. Too shrill? You hit too hard. This is medieval percussion, and your audience is fire itself. And just like that, your wrist gives a sharp twist. Pain shoots up your arm like a lightning bolt dressed in nails. You drop the shoe, stifle a curse, and soak your wrist in cold water, knowing it'll swell. Historians still argue whether medieval blacksmiths had any real first aid or just folk remedies involving goose fat and questionable prayers. You go with the prayer, and maybe a stale onion poultice. There's a boy watching you from outside. He wants to be you someday. You wave him away, not out of cruelty, but mercy. Your fingers have permanent grooves. You've inhaled so much iron dust that your nose sometimes leaks gray when you sneeze. Your back screams every morning. There's a soft clicking in your knee now, something that began after you slipped on a wet forge floor last winter. The bell rings. A noble squire appears demanding repairs for a dented helmet. You clean it first, an absurd hour-long exercise involving vinegar, sand, and elbow grease that would make modern rust removers weep. You polish, reshape, and buff until it gleams with the kind of effort no one ever sees. The squire grunts. No thank you, just a thin silver coin and a comment about how it should have been faster. You smile, because the helmet was dented while protecting a man who will never know your name. That's how it goes. The forge is your ecosystem. The tools are your fauna. Hammer, anvil, tongs, fuller, swage. Each worn, each one a weird friend you argue with daily. You whisper to your hammer like it's a pet. You nicknamed your favorite anvil Old Grum. You joke with the forge when it misbehaves. Gentle sarcasm helps the pain go down. Some say blacksmiths developed unique muscle patterns, their arms disproportionately strong, backs bowed, chest broadened by decades of manual labor. It's true, your silhouette wouldn't look out of place at a strongman contest, but your fingers twitch at night, and your elbows lock at odd angles. You stitch a cut in your palm with thread. No needle, just thread and grit. It's a fringe trick passed from one smith to another, less stitching, more sealing with pain and pressure. You pause at midday. There's bread, hard as stone, and a bit of cheese. You eat slowly, hoping it lasts. The walls flicker with the forge's glow, and outside the village moves on, as if you're just smoke. Here's a joke you repeat to yourself. You know you've made it as a blacksmith when you own 3 things: pain, debt, and a room full of broken tools. Funny, right? You remember your youth, your master's bark, the first time your fingers blistered into bubbles that popped by dinner. You wish you didn't. A fringe theory claims that blacksmiths were tougher than knights in some ways, more resistant to heat, more adaptable, less vain. But no bard sings about the man who forged the sword, only the guy who swings it. You don't ask for recognition. You ask for dry firewood and enough coin to buy salt this week. Maybe next week meat. You rub your shoulder, feel the knot forming, a gift from yesterday's 12-hour forge shift. And you laugh. Because pain? That's a coworker now.
Murmur, but your body still feels like a walking bruise. You slump beside the door frame, staring across the muddy street toward the castle you helped shape indirectly. Those iron bars guarding the treasury, yours. The hinges on the torture chamber door, you bent those into place yourself. The black iron cross on the gate, custom order, took a week. And yet, you're invisible. Nobody waves when you pass. You're not invited to banquets or council meetings. You don't even get a nod from the knight whose armor you mended yesterday. Blacksmiths built the bones of medieval society, metal bones, fire-forged sinew, but the legacy's almost always unsung. You exist in shadows that glow. You remember fixing the Baron's dining hall chandelier, working on your back like some kind of medieval mechanic. It dripped candle wax into your beard. The cook offered you a chunk of bread. The noble said nothing. That's the thank you sandwich. One slice of civility, one thick cut of indifference. Historians still debate how socially mobile a blacksmith could be. In some towns, smiths were respected as artisans, sometimes even serving as informal judges or council members. But more often, you were just the guy who made useful stuff. Replaceable, quiet, tolerated. Once a bard sang at the tavern about Sir Cedric's mighty lance. You were 3 mugs in and shouted, "I made that." The crowd laughed, not with you. You pass by the church and spot the iron gate you repaired last spring. Still holding, still not acknowledged. Even the priest acts like it mended itself. You hear chatter at the market, 2 merchants arguing over iron weights. One claims hers were forged better. You made both. One of them is slightly off, on purpose. The merchant asked for it so she could tip the scales without suspicion. That's your crime. That's your secret. She slipped you 2 extra coins. Sometimes corruption isn't a roaring blaze. It's a quiet ember you breathe in daily. There's a fringe theory that blacksmiths operated like medieval hackers, embedding secrets in their work. Hidden symbols, initials, even political allegiances etched under metal flanges. You once carved a tiny crescent into a spearhead for a rebel knight. No one ever found it. You still whisper crescent when you pass by his old war memorial. You craft more than metal. You craft echoes, forgotten fingerprints of a soul pressed into iron. Some evenings, young lovers leaned against fences you forged. Children swing from gates you shaped. Drunks slam mugs onto tables you reinforced. You're everywhere and nowhere. You once tried branding your work, a small claw mark etched inside every hinge and blade. It didn't stick. The town elders said it was vanity, so you stopped. You still do it, though, just very, very small. A traveling scholar stopped by last summer asking about Damascus steel. You couldn't help much because your tools aren't designed for the secrets of folded layers and carbon elegance, but you offered him a look at your edge tempering method. He seemed impressed. Left without paying. You clean your anvil with vinegar and straw. You talk to it softly, like it's the only thing that listens. Sometimes you joke that the anvil should run from Mare. At least it holds things together. There's a boy in the village who thinks you're a wizard. You sharpen blades with such finesse he swears you're channeling spirits. You wink and play along. Let the myth live. Being invisible has its perks. You get to be a rumor.
You stare at a ledger that's more smudged than ink. Accounting isn't your strongest suit, but famine doesn't care. You've got 3 sacks of coal, half a barrel of nails, and a goat someone traded for 3 gate latches last month. You're a blacksmith, not a merchant, but medieval life doesn't let you pick and choose. Bartering is your daily circus. A plowshare for 2 chickens, a short sword for 4 days' bread, a horseshoe for a promise to pay when the barley comes in. You don't get rich. You don't even get square deals half the time. You just hope the baker's next time isn't too far off. Your forge runs on fuel, literal and emotional. You chop firewood before dawn and drag it back like Atlas Reborn. Your arm still clicks from that old sprain. And with every log you stack, you count coins in your head you don't actually have. There's a fringe theory that blacksmiths used metal scraps as unofficial currency, bits of broken rivets or excess chain links, traded quietly like barter tokens. You tried that once. The candlemakers scoffed. Your currency became doorstops. Feudal taxes hit next. You owe a portion of your forge's output to the local lord. Hinges, hooks, knives, even arrowheads if war looms. No pay, just obligation. If you refuse, your workshop mysteriously loses roof shingles overnight. You humbly comply. You once forged a dozen iron shackles for the local jail, each ring tight, secure, unmoving. You hated every strike. But that contract paid in cured meat and wool, and winter was coming. Survival beats pride. A curious friar stops by, asking if blacksmithing can truly be divine labor. He quotes texts, says heat and transformation mirror spiritual cleansing. You nod, half listening while tonguing a blade that looks like it was chewed by trolls. He leaves behind a small prayer scroll. You use it to wrap your lunch. Historians still argue whether rural blacksmiths had financial independence or operated under near servitude. In some regions, a successful blacksmith could own land and even hire apprentices. But for you, owning land means borrowing tools to plow it. Hiring help means convincing a cousin who'd rather herd goats. The market buzzes today. A traveling knight passes through, his armor scratched, his coin pouch swinging like temptation. You bid low, he pays lower. The dented breastplate you repair shines like a moonbeam by sunset. He rides off without goodbye. You stare at the silver coin left behind. It's bent. Doesn't matter. It'll buy salt and barley. By twilight, you consider which tools to repair and which debts to ignore. A local potter still owes you for a kiln latch. The cooper skipped town with my barrel hoops. You shrug. The system favors those who fight, not those who forge. Here's one of your recurring jokes. Being a blacksmith means building things for people richer than you, who then forget to pay for the things you built. You once made a chandelier for the manor's new dining hall. It was elaborate. Iron vines, candle holders shaped like wolves. Took 2 weeks. Payment? Exposure. The Lord said, "Everyone will see your work." You thanked him through gritted teeth and immediately forged a metal curse. One of the wolves' teeth is crooked on purpose.
You sit under a twilight sky, painted in forged smoke hues. Your fingers ache, your stomach growls, and your mind drifts towards impossible things, like charging interest. You're not rich, not respected, not even remembered by the next generation. But when winter comes and steel holds, someone whispers, "We need the blacksmith." And you answer.
You blink away a blur of fatigue and smoke. Again. Only this time, you're not hammering horseshoes, but poring over faded scrolls in a sun-drenched chamber deep within ancient Egypt. You're still working with metal, sort of, but this forge burns brighter in the realm of spirit than steel. You're now an alchemist's assistant, swept into a strange realm where transformation doesn't just apply to iron, it applies to you. Your hands are calloused still, but instead of soot, they're stained with powder ground from meteorite, copper shavings, and dried lotus. The recipe scrolls look more like poetry than instructions. Breathe the golden breath of day into the metal that hides its true maim. You wonder if you've joined a cult or a chemistry class, but either way, it pays better than blacksmithing. This is Heliopolis, the city of the sun. Somewhere nearby, worshippers offer incense to Thoth, the ibis-headed god of wisdom and writing. He's the patron of transformation, the spiritual father of alchemy. You hear legends of the emerald tablet inscribed with secrets that claim, as above, so below. Some say it was written by Thoth himself, etched in green fire. Others say it's metaphor. You think it's more of a flex than a fact. Historians still argue whether the emerald tablet was a physical relic or symbolic text, but here it feels real. The scrolls reference it constantly. It's the key to alchemical doctrine, turning base metal into gold, not through brute force, but through divine resonance. You stare at a brass bowl that glows green when heated. Coincidence? Maybe. Magic? Maybe more. Your teacher is old, quiet, and blind in one eye. He believes all transformation must reflect cosmic balance. He says the metal must remember the stars before becoming gold. You nod like that makes sense. You're given tasks. Grind red ochre into dust, channel breath through glass tubes, time your steps by planetary alignments. It's basically wizardry with homework. One scroll reads, "Lead is the mirror of the soul, dark, heavy, stubborn. Gold is the purified self, bright, light, incorruptible." You start wondering if this is a metaphor for therapy. There's a fringe theory that ancient Egyptian alchemists were more philosophers than chemists, using metalwork as a mirror to inner transformation. Honestly, it tracks. You help mix natron, ash, and egg yolk in a crucible. It smells like a haunted breakfast, but the result? A gleaming paste that bonds with copper to produce a golden shimmer. You gasp! Your teacher laughs. Not gold, he says, but gold's echo. Close enough. At night, you study the stars. The forge and the sky begin to blur, both burning, both unpredictable, both capable of turning darkness into light. There's a quiet joke among alchemists. If you find real gold, you missed the point. You're taught that true alchemy purifies the soul. Your blacksmith past taught you to endure. Now you're learning to transform. As the moon rises, you stare at your palms. They still bear the shadows of iron, but now
They hold light, too. Maybe you haven't escaped the forge. You've just changed its name. You run a palm across ancient stone, warm with afternoon sun, carved with symbols you don't yet understand. You're now in Persia, trailing the whispers of transformation through winding libraries and dusty sanctuaries. Alchemy has shifted, still sacred, still mysterious, but laced now with Zoroastrian dualism, light and darkness, spirit and matter. You begin to sense that metal isn't just material, it's metaphor. Your new teacher wears robes stitched with celestial maps and speaks in riddles. He says, "Fire is holy, but it lies." You blink. He laughs, then hands you a scroll so worn it crumbles in the corners. It talks of transformation, not only of lead to gold, but of ignorance into insight, of body into spirit. This is proto-science with poetry. In Persian alchemy, balance is everything. Sulfur and mercury aren't just ingredients, they're cosmic principles. Mercury is fluid, mysterious, feminine. Sulfur is fiery, active, masculine. Together, they birth transformation. Your job now involves weighing powders with featherweight precision while chanting quietly beneath an oil lamp. If you sneeze, you ruin the process. No pressure. There's a fringe theory that Zoroastrian priests coded secret teachings into alchemical diagrams, guarding knowledge from political upheaval. You find a sketch of two serpents entwined, labeled opposition. You're told it represents the eternal struggle between Ahura Mazda, truth, and Angra Mainyu, deceit. You wonder if your own pain from blacksmithing was part of some cosmic curriculum. You grind copper and lapis lazuli under moonlight, combining metals and pigments to create what your teacher calls spirit mirrors, shiny discs that supposedly reflect your soul instead of your face. Yours shows a blur. He says that's normal. Transformation takes time. Historians still debate whether Persian alchemy influenced European practices directly or through Arabic intermediaries. The timelines weave like braided threads. What matters to you now is the task at hand, crafting something that glows not because it's metal, but because it remembers starlight. Sometimes you look at your hands, so long in the forge, now soaked with oils and stained by saffron powder. They feel different, lighter, less burdened. You joke to your teacher that you may turn into Mercury yourself. He says, "Not yet, but you're no longer iron." You've begun to dream in symbols, wings, flames, spirals. You don't know what they mean, but each morning you wake with a quiet certainty. Something is shifting. You set the crucible down and whisper thanks, not to a god, but to the fire itself. It's no longer just a tool, it's a guide. You stir the cauldron with the kind of focus that could stop time. The paste inside shimmers, then dulls, then glows again, like it's having a mood swing. You're still an alchemist's apprentice, now standing inside a smoky stone chamber in Roman Egypt, circa somewhere between myth and history. The scrolls here don't care for math, they care for metaphors.
which means you're about to chase spiritual truth through chemical experiments that occasionally explode. Today, you're studying under Zosimos of Panopolis. You know, the guy some call the father of alchemy. He's a mystic, part laboratory gremlin. His instructions? Equal parts scripture and scavenger hunt. One scroll reads, "Purify your soul before you purify your silver." Another warns about the weeping metal. You whisper that to yourself in the dark. The metal doesn't respond. Probably not emotionally available. Roman Egypt is a melting pot. Greek philosophy, Egyptian mysticism, Roman bureaucracy. You can't even sneeze without triggering a discussion on Plato. Alchemy here has evolved beyond metallurgy. It's about the soul, the body, transformation through suffering. Sound familiar? It's basically blacksmithing in emotional cosplay. Historians still argue whether Zosimos's visions were literal hallucinations or spiritual allegories. He writes of dream journeys, descending into an alchemical vessel, meeting creatures made of fire and smoke, dissolving in acid, then rebirthing as pure spirit. You consider this while cleaning the lab floor with vinegar and crushed pearl. Nothing says enlightenment like oyster dust in your socks. One quirky scroll describes a dream ritual involving crocodile dung sunscreen. Yes, that's apparently a thing. You try not to laugh. But you do wonder, if physical purification was sacred, maybe smearing swamp goo was once considered holy skincare. Your teacher insists the lab isn't a place, it's a mirror. Every failed experiment reveals something about yourself. So far, you've learned you're impatient, sarcastic, and slightly afraid of mercury vapor. This is told as progress. You fashion a rudimentary distillation coil out of bronze tubing and clay. Steam curls from the mixture of wine, myrrh, and mystery. It smells like haunted perfume and regret. A nearby scribe notes that the color shift implies successful extraction of essence. You nod, though you're not entirely sure. Essence of what? Alchemy here feels like cosmic improv. Lead doesn't just become gold, it yearns to. You're just here to facilitate its dreams. There's a saying, metal sleeps until it sings. So you heat, wait, chant, and wonder what your own song would sound like. The fringe belief is that some Roman Egyptian alchemists attempted human transformation, not turning people into gold, but into something closer to divinity. Transcendence, they called it. Sounds exhausting. You'd settle for a bath. Outside, the Nile sings its eternal lullaby. Inside, you scribble notes in charcoal, mix solutions, and reflect. Alchemy no longer feels separate from you. It's just your forge, dressed in mysticism and scrolls. Same burn, new purpose. You hold a vial to the torchlight. It gleams green, briefly, softly. Maybe that's the soul. Maybe that's copper having a moment. Either way, you grin. You're becoming something else.
You breathe in the dry air of Kufa, or perhaps Baghdad. It's hard to tell. Time and geography twist like incense smoke in this part of history. You're now cloaked in the robes of an Islamic Golden Age apprentice, and your teacher is none other than Jabir Ibn Hayyan. Some call him the father of modern chemistry. Others call him maddeningly peptic. You call him fascinating. The laboratory hums with energy and prayer. Instead of gods and mystics, you now hear phrases like balance the vessel's geometry and record all observations. This isn't just alchemy, it's proto-science. You grind minerals, measure ratios, and transcribe results with the precision of a medieval scholar trying to impress the universe. Jabir believes in transformation, spiritual and empirical. He teaches that everything, even metals, has an inner nature, or jawar, and your job is to coax it outward. You heat iron with ammonium chloride. Wait, pray, stir, wait again. It fizzes ominously. Jabba nods. He suffers before it reveals. You wonder if that's true of people, too. Historians still argue whether Jabir was one man or a pseudonym used by a group of scholars. Either way, the writings attributed to him are vast. Over 3,000 works mixing chemistry, philosophy, and sometimes coded symbolism. One recipe involves lion's blood and phoenix tears. You ask where to source those. Jabir smiles. From your patience. You invent new tools. The alembic, a distillation flask, is your favorite. It gurgles like a contemplative teapot. You distill rose water to learn heat thresholds, then move on to vitriol and sulfur. Everything smells aggressive, like a witch's perfume cabinet on fire. Jabir emphasizes purity, not just in metals, but in you. He quotes verses about refining the soul. You nod, covered in soot. It's ironic, sure, but maybe it fits. A fringe belief circulates that Jabir's most precious formula, the elixir of life, is encrypted across dozens of texts. People still chase that legend. You just try not to confuse your mercury jars. Each process takes days. You chart color changes, fume intensity, metallic reactions, and unlike previous alchemies, Jabir wants documentation. He's building repeatable methodology. You're building muscle memory and mild insomnia. Sometimes you catch him praying between procedures. He says divine truth and material truth are twins. You stir a compound and hope it agrees. You joke with fellow apprentices about gold anxiety, the irrational hope that every mixture might shine. One apprentice once screamed after heating tin and seeing a golden gleam. Turned out it was reflected sunlight. Still, he got a nickname, Sir Shine-a-Lot. Jabir lectures about how copper must die to become gold. You write that down, but underline die 3 times. You're starting to think metal is melodramatic. The lab becomes a temple. Fire, flask, formula. You no longer fear mistakes. You dissect them. You record the failed ratios. You compare your errors to Jabir's musings. You begin to glimpse the truth. Knowledge isn't just inherited, it's forged. You wipe sweat from your brow, check the alembic one last time. The distillate is pale, golden, stable. You smile, not because it's gold, but because it's yours.
You sit inside a stone chamber lit by torches and secrets. Dust motes drift like suspended whispers. You've crossed into medieval Europe, alchemy's moody teen phase. Gone are the open-air scroll readings and gleaming vials. Here, everything is cloaked in velvet and caution. You're a blacksmith by origin, an alchemist by obsession, and now something else entirely. You wear a wool robe that smells like burnt parchment and stress. The book in your lap talks of the philosopher's stone, a mythical substance said to turn lead into gold and unlock eternal life. Sounds ridiculous. Also sounds like the most important thing anyone's ever looked for. You circle the word transmutation and pretend you understand the implications. You work in secret, because public alchemy's about as welcome as plague rats in a monastery. You heat compounds in hollowed-out bricks and whisper prayers in Latin. Your crucibles crack often. Your mixtures hiss. Your neighbors suspect you're summoning demons, or worse, studying science. Historians still argue whether medieval European alchemists were heretics, scientists, or just bored monks with chemistry hobbies. Some cloisters tolerated alchemical studies, if you couched everything in theology. Others banned it entirely, citing moral rot and excessive mercury exposure. You operate under candlelight and plausible deniability. Your mentor is a soft-spoken recluse named Brother Liron. He talks about soul purification and gold like they're synonyms. He shows you how to temper silver with antimony and how to sketch pentagrams discreetly on recipe margins. You don't ask why. You just do. It's safer that way. There's a quirky belief that the philosopher's stone isn't a stone. It's a process, an awakening, something you become, not something you find. So you meditate while stirring powders and pretend enlightenment is just 3 crucibles away. Spoiler, it's not. You scribble coded notes in a ledger bound with goat skin. Some symbols are meaningless, others only you understand. It's your diary, your lab manual, your legacy in progress. You add exaggerated swirls to your signature. Makes it feel official. You heat tin with acetic acid in hopes of coaxing a golden shimmer. It doesn't work. Again. You laugh. Joke's on you. Alchemy's just chemistry dressed as metaphysics wearing a cape. You whisper to your latest mixture. You want to change? It fizzles in response. You call that progress. The fringe theories are endless. Some claim the philosopher's stone was discovered and hidden in a cathedral. Others say it was smuggled in the lining of a monk's robe. There's even a rumor that an immortal alchemist lives in Venice, selling spells disguised as silk. You don't believe any of it, but you still knock twice before entering your lab. One day, your experiment turns violet. That's new. That's exciting. You wave down Brother Liron, who squints, grins, and says, "You're getting closer." Then he coughs for 10 minutes, because mercury fumes are no joke. You wash your hands with lie and regret, then log the results. No gold, no eternal life, but your pulse quickens. The air feels different. You can almost see your breath dancing with promise. You're not a smith anymore. Not really. You're part monk, part madman, part dreamer. You forge transformation not through fire and hammer, but through metaphor, mystery, and mumbled Latin. You light one final candle and whisper, "As above." The shadows flicker. You smile. You're getting there. You descend into the earth, not metaphorically, but literally, down a steep, narrow shaft in the volcanic heart of central Turkey. Welcome to Cappadocia, land of fairy chimneys above and mysterious cities below. You're not a blacksmith now, nor an alchemist. You're a wanderer in stone, hunched under ceilings that scrape your scalp, moving deeper into shadows carved by ancient hands. The walls pulse with cool air. You brush your fingers along pumice-soft stone. This isn't granite or marble, but volcanic tuff, so light you could dent it with a spoon, yet resilient enough to hold cities. Yes, cities. Not caves or shelters, cities. Some of these complexes stretch 8 floors deep, housing thousands, complete with kitchens, churches, markets, and even schools. You're inside a medieval suburb, carved by ghosts. Historians still argue whether the earliest underground cities began during Hittite times or if they were refugee constructions during the Roman persecutions. What's agreed upon? They're stunning feats of communal engineering. And right now you're climbing down a ladder into a room that might have once been a winery or a prison. No labels, just stories. Each chamber echoes differently. Some amplify footsteps, others swallow them. You spot carved alcoves in a circular room with soot stains, perhaps an old kitchen, perhaps a sanctuary. One quirky chamber features a stone mill that doubled as a ventilation shaft and a rolling door. It weighs hundreds of kilograms, yet rolls with eerie ease. You test it just slightly. It groans, sealing the exit with a sigh. You make a mental note to not die here. The deeper you go, the quieter the world becomes. No wind, no birds, just your breath. The floor tilts downward, revealing a hallway that narrows unnaturally. You must crouch. You laugh. Medieval spelunking wasn't on your resume. There's a fringe theory that these cities were built not just for refuge from invaders, but for protection from unknown threats, cosmic, environmental, maybe even otherworldly. You walk past niches that look suspiciously ceremonial, altars or alien comms. The debate rages. You examine soot marks clustered above an arch, indicating prolonged torch use. This space was lived in. You picture families sleeping here, whispering legends, baking flatbread while children chase echoes. You reach a circular chamber. The ceiling's scorched, and the floor slopes to a carved drain. A communal kitchen? A ritual site? Both? No signage, just guesses. A scholar's map says this city connects to another via tunnel, a 2-mile crawl that only a desperate crowd would endure. You wonder what they were fleeing. Mongol invasions? Byzantine purges? Earthquakes? Something worse. One carved wall shows faint engravings, symbolic sunbursts, and what might be a constellation. You trace them with reverent fingers. This isn't just architecture, it's memory. Your candle flickers. You turn toward a stairwell that spirals downward again. Of course, you descend, feeling like a tourist in someone else's emergency plan. You pass a dusty niche with pottery shards. You spot soot-blackened chimneys bored into ceilings, angled for ventilation. Whoever built this knew their fire math. You reach the deepest level marked on the guide, a hollow, wide chamber with benches carved from the wall. A meeting place. You sit. Dust dances. Silence presses. You close your eyes and imagine it. Thousands sheltered here, sleeping, hoping, hiding. A stone womb for a civilization in peril. The city doesn't answer you. It simply holds you. You run your fingers along a smooth tunnel wall that curves like a whisper through Cappadocia's volcanic belly. You're deeper now, not just underground, but under layers of silence and ingenuity. Each step echoes with questions. Who built all this? Why here? And how in the medieval world did anyone pull it off? The hallway narrows, then opens abruptly into a chamber lined with small square holes. Pigeon nests? Actually, yes. Cappadocia's ancient engineers bred pigeons here to carry messages and fertilize vineyards with their droppings. Life below ground wasn't just survival, it was strategy. The stone itself became multi-tool. You bend down near a dusty pipe, not metal, not clay, but carved straight into tough rock. Water once flowed here, fresh, filtered, and secure. A marvel of medieval plumbing, still debated by scholars who wonder whether the methods were shared or spontaneously discovered. Either way, it's brilliant. You peer into the pipe and imagine a stream singing through darkness. Your candle sputters. You light another. Its glow reveals a trap door etched into the floor, a passage leading deeper still. You shake your head, laugh softly. Who needs monsters when your ancestors built labyrinths? There's a fringe theory that Cappadocia's tunnels were shaped to confuse attackers. Hallways that bottleneck, stairways that twist, blind corners that swallow torchlight. Some even suggest the cities were designed for psychological defense, not just physical safety. You test it. After 3 turns, you're not sure which way is back. Point proven. You reach a long corridor. Along its sides, rolling stone doors. Massive discs that could seal passageways with a single shove. No hinges, just brute design. You try moving one. It shifts, grudgingly, then settles into its groove like a stone eye closing. Safe, trapped, both. You enter a room with a small stone shelf, charred around the edges. It's clearly a kitchen, probably communal. You imagine the soft crackle of shared fires, steam rising from barley stew, children begging for seconds. Resilience tastes like home cooking. In the far corner, a narrow shaft ascends, ventilation most likely. Some speculate these cities had airflow systems as advanced as medieval castles. You test it with a feather. It flutters upward, still working. Historians still argue whether Cappadocia's subterranean cities connected via networks. Some maps suggest interlinking tunnels spanning kilometers, like a stone web beneath central Anatolia. You want to believe it. It feels right. This wasn't panic architecture. It was community carved into permanence. You pass another chamber. Its acoustics shift. It hums when you speak. Probably a mating room, maybe a chapel. Symbols are faint on the wall. Crosses, stars, spirals. Echoes of faith under threat. You sit on the stone bench, whisper your name, and hear it bounce back like a promise. You catch yourself smiling, not because you've solved any mysteries, but because you're walking through proof that even in fear, people build beauty. These cities weren't tombs, they were sanctuaries, cleverly, quietly magnificent. You press onward, the torch flickering soft gold on walls that once held families, prayers, and secrets.
You turn a bend and pause. Your torchlight catches a faded carving of a sun with rays spiraling outward, etched above a narrow doorway. You duck inside and enter one of Cappadocia's living quarters. This room is smaller, cozier, shaped like a half-buried pumpkin. Against one wall, shallow niches once held oil lamps. Their soot remains like black freckles scattered across the stone. You imagine a family here, parents huddled together, kids giggling under woven blankets, a stew bubbling gently in a clay pot. Not rich, not fancy, but safe, at least for now. You spot a worn grindstone embedded in the floor, used for flour, and beside it a carved recess likely held water jugs. Survival wasn't just a miracle, it was organized, ingenious, deliberate. Your mind drifts to the reason this city exists at all. Above ground, dangers ran rampant. Invasions, religious persecution, plague. Some say the locals fled marauding armies. Others whisper of volcanic winters or celestial omens. Historians still argue whether Cappadocia's underground cities were preemptive sanctuaries or desperate adaptations. You think probably both. A fringe belief floats around that these hidden cities were built by priest engineers who dreamed of living closer to the womb of the earth, tapping into subterranean energies. You chuckle, but the vibe here is strange, intimate, protective, like stone itself is guarding you. You walk past a sealed shaft. It's tiny, just wide enough for smoke to escape. You strike a match near its opening and watch the flame bend toward the air current. Still working. It's medieval HVAC, elegantly simple. In the corner lies a large grinding bowl, cracked but intact. Nearby, remnants of a clay oven, its shape reminiscent of a bread dome. You run your hand over it, feel tiny divots where generations once kneaded dough. You whisper, "You lived here." The room doesn't answer, but it listens. Your torch flickers. You spot a small carved alcove beside the entrance, possibly for sacred objects, maybe just a shoe nook. Historians can't agree. Either way, it feels human. Further in, you find a communal sleeping area, a wide chamber with low stone bunks carved directly from the walls. Scraps of linen and animal hair still linger, fossilized by centuries. You step carefully. This was someone's bedroom, someone's nest. Outside the room, a corridor leads to what might be a worship site. The ceiling curves into an arch, and symbols, crosses, crescents, stars, adorn the walls like ancient graffiti.
You light a lamp and squint. One carving shows a figure holding a torch under a mountain. Guidance, warning, unknown. There's a moment where your own breath slows. This place, this story, isn't about kings or battles or empires. It's about endurance, about dinner cooked underground while the world above burned. You hear a soft rustling, probably your footsteps bouncing around the corridors. But a tiny part of you wonders, did someone just sigh? You explore one final space, a nursery perhaps, rounded alcoves, tiny footprints fossilized in dust. You imagine lullabies whispered beneath earth walls, prayers sung into silence, and dreams wrapped in shadow. Not grand, not glorious, but breathtaking in its simplicity. These people didn't live underground because they wanted to. They lived because they had to. And they made it home.
Your eyes blink slower now, as if some part of you has already slipped into sleep. You're standing in a temple somewhere between history and dream, the walls adorned with painted stars and golden eyes. Tonight's journey leads inward through the fog of the unconscious into the sacred realm of dreams. In ancient Mesopotamia, they believed dreams came from gods, each vision a whisper from Enlil, Ishtar, or even the dead. And you? You just woke from one where your teeth were made of silver keys and the sky was trying to unlock you. You write it down as instructed. You're part of a dream interpretation ritual now. The temple priest asks if you saw water, fire, animals. He scribbles furiously, decoding symbols as if your subconscious is a cipher. It's equal parts psychotherapy and horoscope, but with incense and chanting. A fringe tradition in Assyria claimed certain herbs enhanced prophetic dreaming. Blue lotus, mandrake, even fermented barley cakes blessed under moonlight. You taste one, and it's like chewing hope mixed with kitchen regret. Tonight, you sleep in the temple of Marduk. Or maybe it's Ra, maybe Asclepius. The names blur, but the vibe is the same. Sacred dreaming. You lay on woven mats in a hall with dozens of others, all hoping for visions. Somewhat healing. Others seek advice. One guy just wants to win a grain dispute. Historians still argue whether dream incubation, sleeping in temples to provoke visions, was purely spiritual or part of early medicine. What's clear is that people believed in dreams enough to build entire practices around them. Your own dream, once it hits, is strange. You're falling through clouds made of scrolls, chased by a forge fire that speaks Latin. You're scared. You're laughing. You wake with tears and charcoal on your hands. You share the dream. The priest smiles, explains. Fire is transformation. Latin is forgotten wisdom. Scrolls? Your legacy. You blink, surprised. You've just had a consultation with your soul. There's a stone relief nearby, showing a figure with a star on its forehead and wings rising from its back. Someone carved it 3,000 years ago to honor divine vision. You reach out,
Feel the grooves. Whisper thanks. One ancient Egyptian papyrus describes dream messages from the dead. Mothers cautioning against arranged marriages, uncles recommending new plowing techniques. You wonder what your ancestors would send you. Better tongs? A warm cloak? You explore a chamber where dream scripts were recorded, rows of clay tablets etched with symbols like child becomes bird and sun drowns in sand. You decipher a few, laugh softly. Some are poetic, others pure nightmare fuel. You learn about the practice of drawing dreams, not writing them. One scroll recommends sketching the shape of fear before breakfast. You try it and produce something that looks like a confused jellyfish. The priest nods solemnly. Very profound. At twilight, you sit beside a basin filled with moonlit water. A ritual begins. Drop a stone, chant, and watch the ripples. Each ripple represents an unanswered question. You count 7. Your dream journal now includes visions of underground cities, glowing swords, talking mercury, and birds flying through fire. None of it makes sense. All of it feels true. You smile as sleep creeps in. Tonight, the gods might knock, so you leave the door slightly ajar. You exhale slowly as you step into a room lined with reed mats and clay tablets. Tonight, you're a scribe, more dream decoder than dreamer, sitting cross-legged in an ancient archive surrounded by whispers. Your fingers are smudged with ochre ink and the occasional sesame paste snack. Welcome to the world of ancient dream interpreters, where symbols shape reality and sleep is a classroom. You're in Mesopotamia now, maybe Nineveh, maybe Babylon, where kings wouldn't declare war or marry without consulting a dream priest. These weren't your average therapists. They were professional vision whisperers, steeped in divination and storytelling. You unroll a tablet titled The Dream of the Moon's Teeth. It involves a goat, an eclipse, and an army. You grin. Classic goat plot. Next to you, another scribe mutters about fish dreams, which apparently mean abundance, unless the fish wears a crown. Then it's betrayal. You jot that down under weird, but possibly important. Historians still argue whether dream interpreters had political power or were just cultural accessories. Some texts suggest they advised rulers directly. Others imply they were temple side hustlers, part mystic, part librarian. Either way, their tablets outlived their reputations. There's a fringe belief that dream scripts were shared between cultures. Egyptians swapping notes with Sumerians, Greeks cribbing Mesopotamian visions. You once read a cross-reference dream index listing teeth falling out as divine punishment and wedding luck. Contradictory? Absolutely. You love it. You're invited into an Egyptian temple tonight. Sleep chambers lined with polished stone and perfumed cotton. The priest asks what you've seen. You whisper, "A forge melting into feathers." He nods and hands you a scroll. It smells like cedar and possibility. You now sit beneath a canopy of stars etched into temple ceilings. A basin of sacred oil reflects your face, distorted, glowing. The priest says it's a symbol, you becoming. In a corner, you spot a man climbing a ladder made of serpents. Interpretation? Transformation through danger. You're getting good at this. You wander through Greek healing temples next. Asclepius features prominently. His staff, serpent entwined, appears in dreams and medicine alike. Here, patients slept inside column-lined sanctuaries, hoping for dream prescriptions. One man dreamed of a talking owl. Diagnosis: liver imbalance. Another: bees in the mouth. Treatment: silence. You raise an eyebrow. Might work. You flip through a Roman dream diary. The author notes recurring visions of iron birds and singing smoke. You blink. That sounds suspiciously like you. You add your own entry. Maybe someone will read it 2,000 years from now and laugh. There's a joke circulating among dream interpreters. If your client dreams of falling, just ask what they're avoiding. If they dream of flying, charge double. Tonight, your own dream unfolds as a spiral staircase into a dark forge, where mercury drips from the ceiling and words form in flame. You wake, sketch it, then whisper the symbols to no one in particular. Dreams aren't just stories here. They're maps, portals, warnings. You realize you've spent most of your life chasing transformation with tools. Now you're using sleep. Before bed, you breathe incense, press clay into your palm, and say softly, "Show me." The shadows smile back.
You rise gently from sleep, as if pulled by silk threads. The dream fades like mist, iron birds again, molten clouds, and voices speaking backwards. You blink. Somewhere nearby, someone else is waking, scribbling in charcoal, whispering to the morning shadows. You're still in the temple, still part of something older than history, a tradition where dreams guide action, reveal secrets, and connect the living to unseen realms. Today, you're no longer a blacksmith or an alchemist or a scribe. You're simply a seeker, standing on the threshold between waking and meaning. Your host leads you to a chamber filled with painted doors. Not actual doors, symbolic ones, each painted in vivid detail. One shows a forge, another a city carved from rock, another the serpent and sun motif seen throughout ancient dream lore. You're told to pick one. You choose the forge, of course. That door glows faintly as you touch it. Inside, a scroll awaits. You read slowly. It tells of a man who forged blades for war, then studied smoke for wisdom, then descended into stone cities, then dreamed himself into a star. You laugh. It's your story. Well, mostly, except for the talking mercury. Historians still debate whether dreams shaped early philosophies or were shaped by them. Chicken and egg stuff. Doesn't really matter, because in this temple, they're one and the same. You sit before a pool of ink. One final ritual.
inscribe your journey. You draw symbols that echo everything you've seen: hammer, flame, serpent, tunnel, eye, wing. You add a spiral for good measure. That's the mark of transformation, they say, and you're definitely transformed. Nearby, a priest interprets your symbols. He calls your forge the heart, your cave the memory, and your winged figure the future. You nod like you understand. Maybe you do. The fringe theory here that dreamers can time travel emotionally, that your dream self connects to ancestors and descendants alike. You don't challenge it. You just feel full, like you've downloaded 1,000 years of mystery. Your companions pack to leave, returning to lives filled with fields, forges, scrolls, and stews. You linger. The priest offers you a pendant, a tiny spiral etched on volcanic stone. You wear it like a whisper of all you've seen. As you step into daylight, the sun seems softer, as if it knows. You inhale, feel the weight of sleep and story lifting. You've journeyed through fire, metal, myth, and mind, and somehow you've come home.